Hey, what's up, Nashville? I am Beau Beach. This is the What You Need to Know podcast, a production of Beechwood Commercial Real Estate Services. We offer the podcast to our clients and potential clients to catch you up on the past few weeks of commercial real estate news in Nashville. We've got a lot going on. It's very hard to stay up to date, even for me, a guy who lives it every day. So I understand your pain, and we are going to efficiently and perhaps in an entertaining way catch you up on some of the past few weeks' most important stories. So let's get started. The Scrapyard gets rezoned into 22 separate parcels. The local investors group plans to redevelop the 47-acre riverfront property into a massive mixed-use development, including towers up to 40 stories high, originally codenamed East Bend, which I think is a terrible name. It'll be interesting to see if that's really how it plays out once some of these projects get off the ground. Some of the key amendments, right? So, anytime you're asking for government approval, they're going to put their fingers on it, right? You never just get a nice, clean approval. They always want to make changes. Kind of like if you ever send a contract to an attorney has never sent a contract back without making any changes, right? That's kind of how the government works too. It doesn't matter how good of a plan you have, they are going to find something to change and use their kind of authoritarian power to get you to submit. In this, what they did is they added a number of amendments. So they required a number of amendments to get signed. I think it was something like 17 amendments, 18 amendments. So, the scrapyard owners brought their plan to the table, and to get the government to sign off, they had to make 18 different amendments to their plan. Here are some of them: a prohibition of beer and cigarette market use, a limit of no more than 12 hotel uses, right? So there's even a amendment that was added regarding the Sphere, right? So executives with the Las Vegas Sphere have had conversations about a potential venue on the scrapyard site. They slipped in an amendment that requires Metro Council approval for any building on the site with more than 6,000 seats that include digital exterior lighting. Well, I wonder what that could be. That could be the Nashville Sphere. And of course, they want an amendment to be able to control that process. Nevertheless, this is the same scrapyard that recently sold for $245 million. An incredible amount of money when you consider the environmental contamination, when you consider the lack of utilities, the lack of infrastructure. There's no roads, there were no parcels. That is an extreme amount of money. And then to have a local group do it with some seller financing, actually, a big bulk of that price was seller financed by the seller, Carl Icahn. A lot of people overlook that. But can you imagine $245 million for some dirt that is going to take years and years and years before that first dollar of cash flow comes back to you? That is big balls is what that is, and I wish them well. I think it's gonna work out. It's just gonna take a long time, and they're just gonna have to weather the storm. They're gonna have to weather that negative cash flow. What I thought was most interesting about this story was the number of parcels. All right, so that's just me, but to take 47 acres and then divide them up into 22 parcels, I'm sure that was quite a process. That's a lot of different parcels, I'm sure, of varying sizes. The ownership group has pitched their vision to build a district centered around family entertainment with potential for a children's museum, grocery store, and more. That's also interesting. So, I don't know if if that's just kind of telling people what they want to hear to get their necessary approvals, which I can understand. But I do think uh, downtown Nashville could use more family-friendly entertainment. And if you could make it there, I think that would probably work. So 245 million for 22 parcels that are still years away from getting developed. It's going to be a very, very interesting project to watch. To my understanding, that entire 47 acres still looks like a scrapyard today. I think it's still being used somewhat. So perhaps they did a short-term sale lease back there, but I would have expected paying that price, you'd clear out all of that scrapyard junk by now, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Let's keep moving. A downtown Franklin building, home to Grays on Main, sells for $5.65 million. Everybody likes downtown Franklin. They say it looks like it's straight out of a Hallmark movie. I agree. One of the most recognized buildings in downtown Franklin is Grays on Main, a former pharmacy that was converted to a multi-level restaurant. The upstairs space, very cool. It's got a stage set up to, you can perform music, and it's just really interesting how they did it. Grays on Main opened way back in 2013. As part of the recent deal, the sellers will no longer be operating Grays on Main, but the restaurant will remain open. The new owner is a restaurateur and does not plan to make any changes to Grays on Main. So this was a purchase of both the building and the business, the buyer being a restaurateur. The sellers still own cocktail bar Oh Be Joyful, which is located next door to Grays on Main, so they aren't going anywhere. The historic building is 5,600 square feet and a recognizable landmark on Franklin's historic square with its blue old school pharmacy sign. The building was originally a pharmacy for almost a century before it was carefully restored in 2013. So a very cool building. If you have a chance, if you're in downtown Franklin and looking for an excuse to try somewhere new, I don't recall how good the food was, but I do recall thinking how cool the building was. And I think most of the seating's actually on the second level with all of the kitchen and back office stuff on the first floor. So the second floor is actually bigger than the first floor, which is also uncommon. So a very cool building. I'm sure they do a nice enough job with the food as well. Check out Grays on Main in wonderful, my favorite, downtown Franklin. Let's keep moving. Apartments near Geodis Park, that's where Nashville SC plays. Apartments near Geodis Park take a $23 million loss. The Braxton Music City development sold for $54 million, marking a nearly 30% loss from its previous sale. This property is located at 2165 Nolensville Pike. The seller was South Carolina-based investment firm PassiveInvesting.com. Well, how's that passive investing going for you now? Braxton Music City is located on a 5-acre site, a short walk from the park, and offers a collective 236 apartment units across 2 buildings. The recent transaction is equivalent to around $230,000 per unit, which seems like plenty for that neighborhood. Don't get me wrong, it's up and coming, but it's not up yet. So I would say 230 per unit sounds like a pretty good number. To have paid 30% more than that sounds like that was a mistake. Sounds like you were spending other people's money. That's what it sounds like to me. Sometimes when you're spending other people's money, the price is less important to you. So be careful with that passive investing. I've always been fearful of losing control of my investments. I'm not a good passive investor. Let's keep moving. Project gets downsized in Pytown. So this is I think, representative of the market today, right? You've got these high profile projects that were teed up years ago. They were all designed to maximize use of that acreage, right? Let's put as many square feet, let's put as many towers, let's put as many floors in the tower as we possibly can. Let's get as absolutely as much out of each of these parcels as we can. That was the idea back when everyone was paying sky high prices for the dirt. The problem is most of those projects have not gotten out of the ground since. And to get them out of the ground, many of them are getting downsized. And I think this is kind of representative of the market for much of that high price land that traded in 21 and 22. Illinois-based T2 Capital Management, who is a big player in Chicago, is very impressive. They're no joke. If they can't get it done, nobody can get it done type thing. Is seeking to start work on a downtown development with short-term rental condos, retail, and restaurant space. The project is called Allegra. It will rise 7 stories, nearly 230,000 square feet, and offer 82 for sale condo units that offer short-term rental options. Located at 621 Middleton Street, the firm had previously pitched a 25-story tower on the property. So it went from 25 stories to 7 stories. So you're hearing me out there. This is representative of the market. In the property originally planned to have roughly 400 luxury residential units, but scrapped those plans last year. T2 paid over $11 million for the 1-acre site in 2022. So that isn't a crazy price for that size site, even back in 2022. But these are difficult projects to get out of the ground right now, and it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with demand, in my opinion. I think it's more so financing or capital, right? Debt and equity capital, in addition to the cost of construction, in addition to, in this moment right now, perhaps downtown is overbuilt for luxury apartments. But of course, these projects wouldn't get completed for a year or two down the road. So it's just, I think it's just a function of the risk tolerance of your capital partners. And a lot of those capital partners have become very risk averse, and that's why these projects are getting downsized. This is an interesting story, right? Jim Reed's lawsuit-plagued former Broadway dealership is now back on the market. And I'll tell you, I'm not sure who's the seller on this deal. Obviously, this is a former automotive site, Jim Reed's Automotive. But if it's the family or if it's Jim himself, they really kind of got shafted on this deal, right? Because let's just get through the story and then I'll kind of summarize it for you. One of Nashville's most desirable pieces of real estate is back on the market after facing several lawsuits and failed development plans. 5.5 acres at the border of Midtown and downtown Nashville. The site was previously under contract to be sold to Houston-based Hines, who was planning a 2.7 million square foot mixed-use development. Hines purchased a portion of the site in 2021, but failed to close on the remaining Reed property after several legal setbacks. In February, Hines scrapped its $32 million development plans, right? So they paid $32 million for a portion of this site. They wanted to buy the other 5.5 acres, right? But the occupant of that other 5.5 acres, an auto dealer, sued, claiming they had the first right to buy it, right? So as Hines and the occupant of this 5.5 acres battled it out with the attorneys, the market shifted, right? So what could have been a closed deal for the Jim Reed family at a sky-high price similar to $32 million, they drug out this legal battle so long that the market shifted, and all of a sudden, Hines really didn't want that other 5.5 acres. So had that occupant not sued for the right to purchase the acreage, Hines very well would have closed on the entire site, and instead of getting 32 million, they likely would have had put 64 million in the bank, right? So I hope I explained that right. But the Jim Reed family lost out on about $32 million. And now they're still sitting on that 5.5 acre site. So they have brought it back to the market, putting one of Nashville's most high profile development sites back into play. The problem is the market is much softer than it was at the time they originally listed it. They timed it beautifully. They timed the market beautifully, but this lawsuit set them back. This property, located near the split of Broadway and West End Avenue, the property is zoned for buildings up to 45 stories with a collective 1.2 million square feet in development potential. There is no asking price established on this new parcel. Tangled in lawsuits for most of 2021, Hines and Martin Management Group, which operated car dealerships on the site, each sued Jim Reed Automotive for alleged ownership rights to the parcels. The lawsuit was dismissed in early 2022, paving the way for Hines to purchase the rest of the site. They say it was dismissed. I wonder if it was settled, right? Because I can see Jim Reed Automotive paying Martin Management Group to go away so Hines can buy the other half of the site and, assumingly pay another 32 million for the other half of the site. So let's assume that happened. They're desperately trying to sell the remainder to Hines. They pay off Martin Management Group to get rid of them. The lawsuit gets dismissed. They put the deal back in contract with Hines. Years went by with no physical movement on the property and no additional closings. Hines didn't close the other half of the deal. In January 2025, a termination of purchase and sale agreement between Hines and Jim Reed Automotive for the rest of the property was filed. So they wasted 3 years trying to figure out how to sell the other half of that site to Hines, only for Hines to back out. The peak years of Nashville's real estate frenzy were 2021 and 2022. While some of these major midtown projects have made progress, others continue to stall. Next door, IBP Properties has broken ground on the first phase of its 3-tower development called the Motley. The firm bought its midtown project site, the former Dairy Factory, which is adjacent to the Reed site, for a collective $80 million in 2022. Brentwood-based GBT Realty and Monarch Alternative Capital bought Beeman's former dealership property in 2021. A month after Hines made its first purchase, GBT paid a whopping $110 million for that land. The firm is planning a 7-tower mixed-use development called Mid-City Nashville, but little progress has been made since the firm began demolition in 2024. So timing is everything, especially if you're selling land. We've got plenty of clients that thought about selling in 2021 and 2022, and they just drugged their feet, maybe got a little bit greedy. Then the market shifted, and now they want to be back in the market selling that land. They want a similar price that they could have gotten 21 and 22. But the moment has passed. There aren't buyers out there at those price points. There are even fewer lenders out there at those price points. And it's just, it's a missed opportunity. And, I'm not sure it was Jim Reed Automotive's fault on that deal. It just sounds like they were dealt a crappy hand of cards. They could have had 64 million locked in at the peak of the market, washed their hands of it, moved on with their lives. Instead, they've been working to sell the remainder for the last 4 or 5 years without any luck. So it's the market isn't any better right now for that type of sale, unless that price is going to change pretty considerably. I'd be happy to be proven wrong on that. Let's keep moving. We got a number of different stories here. We get to 5 things to know about the massive Starbucks announcement. It was recently announced that Starbucks has named Nashville its Eastern U.S. headquarters. 2,000 office jobs are expected in the next 5 years. By headcount, it's one of the largest jobs announcements in the city's history. The average annual salary of $125,000 reinforces the landmark nature of the jobs deal. They are committing to Peabody Union Office Building, where they signed a 250,000 square foot lease for the entire building in the new downtown development. It's the largest office lease signed in Nashville since Amazon committed to its second Nashville Yards Tower in 2021. While Starbucks waits to move into its long-term space, right? So that office building, the interior has not yet been built out. It's going to be built out to their specific needs. While they wait for that to happen, which is expected to happen next year, the Seattle-based company will open a temporary office within Asurion's Gulch headquarters building, where they have a number of sublease space available. 2,000 jobs is one of the largest jobs announcements in Davidson County history, surpassed only by a handful of others, including Oracle, Amazon, and the late 90s recruitment of Dell Technologies, which I didn't know about that one. I didn't know the Dell Technologies one. Around 1,200 of the Nashville-based positions will be in IT. The vast majority of the jobs are going to be coming right here from Tennessee, which that's coming from Bill Lee. So Bill Lee is saying, 2,000 people are not coming from Seattle to Nashville. If you ever been to Seattle, it is the opposite of Nashville. So anybody that's really digging Seattle ain't moving to Nashville, and anybody who's really digging Nashville ain't moving to Seattle. You couldn't pay me any amount of money to move to Seattle. I'll tell you that much. I had to go there, I have to go there every now and then because my daughters are high-level soccer players, and that's where the national tournament is every other year. And I absolutely loathe going there. Absolutely loathe it. So what Bill Lee is saying is most of these 2,000 jobs are going to be filled by local candidates. Some will move, but most are going to be new local hires. The state has committed incentives for the Starbucks expansion. However, it's not been disclosed what. Starbucks could be poised for at least 20 million and likely millions more. The last cash per jobs incentives that Metro approved date to 2019 for Amazon and the headquarters of Alliance Bernstein. 3 reasons why Starbucks landed in Nashville: proximity to important suppliers, access to quickly growing pool of tech talent, and a desire for a presence in a region where Starbucks wants to open more stores. And they don't want to be honest about the real reason. They are being crippled by taxation and regulation in the very blue state of Washington, in the fluorescent blue city of Seattle. There is a real trend to vacate these cities that think businesses and wealthy people only exist to steal from and give to others. You're going to see more and more of this. The wise businesses, even the most liberal amongst them, which I would consider Starbucks, are starting to make business decisions to get out of town. But you can't say that because you've got too big of a presence there. Similar to like In-N-Out, right? In-N-Out added a Eastern U.S. headquarters in Franklin, but they didn't burn their bridges on the way out, right? They did so very nicely, even though we're all very aware of why they're abandoning California. Nashville's cost of living, tech salaries, and high-end office space are all less expensive than Seattle. All right, let's get to the truth of the matter now. Recently, in the Seattle Times, a headline from the morning after the announcement, the publication quoted an unnamed senior executive in Seattle saying, quote, "When the company says Seattle is still the headquarters, people are just rolling their eyes. Everyone is just completely resigned to the idea that this company is moving to Tennessee." There we go. There we go. A little bit of honesty goes a long way. They're looking to rebrand and really change the trajectory of Starbucks. And there's no better place to do that than in Nashville. See, I'm telling you, there's some smart people involved, even if they can't come out and say it because they don't want to be too brutalized on their exit, right? There are smart people that get it, and it makes total and perfect sense to me that you would abandon Seattle and set up shop in Nashville, as many companies are. A quick Titan Stadium update, right? I know that's not real exciting, but let's at least put in perspective where we are. The new $2.2 billion Nissan Stadium reached a 75% completion mark. The new Dome Stadium will anchor the East Bank neighborhood, which broke ground in February of 2024. The site continues to average 2,000 workers per day and is expected to be completed in February of next year. And I do think it was also recently announced that Nashville will host the Super Bowl in 2030. You'll have to fact check me on that, but I do think I read that. So 75% complete, scheduled to be 100% complete in February. Very cool. Let's keep moving. Did you know Waymo, self-driving cars, right? Literally no one sitting in the driver's seat, is now in Nashville? And they've established a very unique partnership from which to grow out this market. Waymo partners with Lyft, which just launched in Nashville. Lyft's subsidiary FlexDrive has officially started construction on its largest autonomous vehicle fleet management facility near the airport. The 83,000 square foot facility will house and manage Nashville's Waymo fleet, which launched rides to the public recently. Waymo is partnering with both Lyft and FlexDrive, a former U.S. Postal Service processing center, which is owned by Houston-based Stone Lake Capital Partners, who purchased the building in 2025 for $10.4 million. The building sits on 5 acres and initially opened in 1995. Lyft is leasing that building. The construction will happen in 3 phases. Phase 1, which has already been completed, was to add the first bay of EV chargers. Phase 2 is building out the office space, break rooms, and vehicle services space. Phase 3 will be to add more chargers for a total of 42 charging stalls, which have dual port chargers. This is Waymo's first partnership with Lyft. The Waymo service area today covers around 60 square miles in the downtown area. They are also hoping to start offering Waymo rides directly through the Lyft app by the end of the year. So this is a partnership where they kind of see some synergies, right? You know, if you can request a self-driving Waymo car through the Lyft app, that is a big deal for Waymo. So I think this is very cool. Most of these Waymo cities, and there aren't too many of them, right? They're really focused on a specific area, and for whatever reason, they don't leave that geo-fenced area. I think it has a lot to do with how the cars work, where they kind of have to uh, memorize the locations in which they operate, whereas a Tesla more so has all of the cameras and can use AI to navigate any situation. I'll tell you, I recently got a self-driving Tesla, and it is unbelievable. Teslas don't necessarily look very cool. I think the outsides are very average, but the insides are awesome, and the tech is mind-blowing. There are not many things that I can buy at this stage of life that really makes a difference, that really makes my life better. But a self-driving car is absolutely one of those things. The self-driving, if you haven't been in a self-driving Tesla in the last year, because the technology is constantly getting better and better and better. If you haven't been in a new Tesla that self-drives in the last year, I highly recommend you try one. I think you will be absolutely shocked by how good the technology is. My wife was dropping my daughter off or picking up my daughter from school. It's about a 30-minute drive. She was so sleepy. She fell asleep during the drive, and she woke up, parked at the school when my daughter stepped in the car, right? So she fell asleep, and the car drove her all the way to my daughter's school, lined up with the rest of the parents, pulled to the front, and when my daughter got in, she woke up. It is that unbelievable. So, uh, I've never been a real car guy, right? I've always driven big cars. I've got a Tahoe as well. Got a bunch of kids. I need big cars. I need manly cars. I need space to carry stuff and deliver stuff. And I've never really thought Teslas look cool. All of that goes right out the window when you realize how life enhancing it is that that car will drive you and you don't have to worry about it. I was speaking with my daughter about it yesterday. I said, the only time I really get to relax during the day is when I'm in my Tesla and it's driving me. I just get to sit back and relax and kind of regroup. Uh, and I look forward to it now. I used to loathe driving, a complete waste of time and energy. And now with the Tesla, it's like, okay, I get a little bit of me time while I sit here and let this car drive me across town. So there you go. That's a 10 out of 10 endorsement for the new Teslas. But we got to keep moving here. We've got 4 short stories to go, and then we're going to sign off here. Painted Tree closes all locations without notice. If you haven't heard of Painted Tree, it's kind of a co-working center for small retail vendors. There's one in Murfreesboro Road one in Franklin off of Murfreesboro Road that just abruptly closed. But you'll walk around a big box store, right? And it's almost like a flea market, but nicer. So you've got all these individual booths set up or whole around the store, and there's not even anybody really manning most of those booths. So you've got just booths full of products, and there's somebody sitting at the front that checks everybody out. So you've kind of got unmanned small retail shops within this big box store, and then you got somebody at the front checking everybody out. So it's kind of a co-working center for small retail vendors. Arkansas-based Painted Tree Boutiques abruptly closed all of its locations nationwide, leaving local vendors who had booths in the Middle Tennessee stores scrambling to retrieve their inventory over the weekend. The Williamson County-based store that I just mentioned is 67,000 square foot and had over 200 business owners. There are also 33 Painted Tree employees who will be affected by the closure. And that's not local. That would be nationwide, I would say. A statement from Painted Tree has been shared by multiple outlets that cites rising costs, shifting market conditions, and the evolving nature of how people shop for challenges it could not overcome. They are expected to declare bankruptcy. So, some of these innovative concepts, just are hard to operate profitably. I imagine, Painted Tree was providing the space, right? Providing the person checking people out, and all of those 200 business owners were paying them a little bit of what we'll call booth rent or, floor rent. And, your profit is really the spread between the two. Can you charge those 200 folks enough rent to cover your costs and make a necessary profit? And it turns out the answer is no. A lot of those big boxes are just hard to make sense of now. We've tried all different types of uses, but it's just difficult. It's difficult to make those big boxes work anymore. Ultimately, I think those big boxes get carved up into much smaller spaces, but that's going to take time. There's going to be an evolution there. Maybe something I don't see coming is around the corner. Let's keep moving. Speaking of kind of next generation retail, Dollar General to unveil its AI-enabled in-store audio network. Dollar General has announced its planned rollout of AI-enabled in-store audio in approximately 6,000 additional stores. The AI-enabled in-store audio network features conventional speakers that are placed throughout each store. The speakers primarily play music, but with the systems automating which stores get which messages based on those stores' respective inventory, what time of day it is, day of the week, and category of product. Dollar General said it will deliver enhanced, localized, and measurable audio experiences to customers while also providing brand partners with accountable data-driven advertising. There it is, right? So this is an advertising service. It integrates with point of sales data, curated music, and AI-generated audio ads to deliver timely, targeted messaging. This platform allows us to deliver localized, real-time messaging at scale, especially in underserved and often overlooked rural areas. It's a powerful way to create value for our brand partners while enhancing the in-store experience for our customers. Founded in 1939 and based in Goodlettsville, Dollar General operates more than 20,000 stores in the United States. So they're using AI to deliver curated audio advertising throughout their stores, which is cool, right? So if you're having trouble selling a particular product, you realize, oh, we've got too much of X product on the shelves. Let's start pushing audio advertising to customers, incentivize them to buy some of that X product. They buy enough of it. Okay, we're good on X product. Let's move over to Y product. And it's just all automated, right? And I think it's very smart and easy. It's not that hard to add some speakers to a store and connect it to a network, right? So I think this is a forward-looking way to sell advertising to your partners, right? Or your suppliers. All right. Real quick, a much hyped burger joint is now open in the arcade. Not a damn chance burger, more oftenly referred to as NADC burger. The concept was launched in Austin in 2022 and also operates in Dallas, Denver, Charlotte, Chicago, Fort Worth, Los Angeles, and New York. NADC Burger focuses its menu on 3 food items: burgers, fries, and cookies. That's it. That's all they sell: burgers, fries, and cookies. And they try to do each of those things the best they can possibly be done. Kind of like In-N-Out's concept, right? But I've heard people talk about NADC burger and they love it. So perhaps I'll be able to get there at some point. The burger is billed as a double patty of 100% Wagyu beef, right? What's Wagyu beef? It's derived from a Japanese cattle breed. American cheese, sauce, onions, pickles, and jalapenos. The price is $16 with an added patty available for $8 more. The fries are made with beef tallow and served with a side of chipotle peppered ketchup. They cost $5. And a brown buttered chocolate chip cookie is priced at $4. It opens 7 days a week from 11:30 in the morning to midnight. I don't get down to the arcade often. I don't get downtown often. But if I get down there, I'm going to try to get that not a damn chance burger and see what's up. All right, lastly, we're going to keep this one quick as well. They've recently announced what the new $620 million TPAC facility is going to look like. The Tennessee Performing Arts Center officials released images for their facility, planned to sit within the East Bank, a futuristic structure to offer a reflective metal facade with aluminum tubes suggesting organ pipes. They expect site work and construction to begin in the first quarter of next year and be completed by 2030. The building, about 307,000 square feet, will sit near the Cumberland River. It will feature 4 different performance venues: a grand Broadway hall hosting TPAC's annual series of marquee touring productions. Next, a dance and opera hall featuring performances by Nashville Ballet, Nashville Operator, and Nashville Repertory Theater. Next, a flexible black box theater. And last, an intimate cabaret hosting musical performances. This building will sit 105 feet tall and connect to the John Sigenhalter pedestrian bridge. The interior of the TPAC building will feature a light-filled atrium, a grand staircase, and 2 lobbies, with the main lobby at street level and offering views of the river. Within the Broadway Theater, a floating wood-clad tray organizes the seating into intimate clusters, each staggered in height for optimized sightlines. A roof terrace will offer patrons views of Broadway, the river, and the Nashville skyline. Let me summarize that for you. We're going really over the top with the new T-Pack, right? The old T-Pack, it's it's old. It's old. It's not modern. It's not nearly nice enough for a city of Nashville's caliber, and it needs to be replaced. And when we do, we're going to go real over the top with it, to the tune of $620 million just on the construction of the building alone. That's got a metal exterior and organ pipes sticking out of it, right? So leave it to the artists to get crazy with the design of the new T-Pack. But I have a dancer in my family as well. So I hope we can get that done so I can still see her perform there. That would make me very happy. So that's the end of the podcast, guys. We caught you up on everything we thought was worthy of your time and attention. I hope we've taught you a little bit something, maybe entertained you just a little bit. Uh, that is our goal of the show. So to sign off, I am Beau Beach. I am a commercial real estate broker who specializes in listing and selling commercial real estate in Nashville and the Southeast. If you are the owner of commercial real estate and ever have any questions about what you should do, or if you ever need any market information, if you need someone just to bounce ideas off of, I would very much appreciate the call or the email. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you next time.